"Come, Trewithen, we are all dying to know," said Lady Rosalind Crane, laughing behind her fan in the middle of 400 people. "Why did you marry her?" "For £70,000, said the Duke of Trewithen. "One does not marry a counting-house for its conversation." The laugh went round the room like a dropped tray. And then it stopped, all at once, in the ugliest silence Talbot had ever stood in, because his wife was 8 feet behind his left shoulder with a glass of orgeat in her hand, and everybody in that circle had seen her there, and he had not. He turned. Honorine, Duchess of Trewithen, 6 months married, 23 years old, wearing white satin and her mother's garnets, and the particular deliberate calm of a woman who has just been struck in public, looked at him for perhaps 2 seconds. Then she said, quite pleasantly, "72, Your Grace." My father added 2 for the wedding clothes, and handed her glass to a footman, and turned to the man beside her, and asked him whether he cared to dance. She danced it. She danced the next one as well, with the Duke of Trewithen's own brother-in-law, and she smiled at somebody's joke, and she went in to supper on the arm of a bishop and talked to him about the Bristol charity schools for 20 minutes. She left at 1 o'clock with her aunt, and she did not once look towards her husband, and by 2 the story was in 11 houses, and by noon the next day it was in all of them. Talbot went home at 4, and sat in his own study without a candle. He had not meant it. That was the entire useless truth of it, and he had 18 hours to look at how useless it was. Rosalind Crane had been baiting him for a month. Rosalind, whom he had nearly married at 24, and had been quietly grateful to escape. And she had asked the question in front of 400 people with her eyebrows up. And Talbot, 5th Duke of Trewithen, 38 years old, master of a mortgaged house and 9 generations of pride, had chosen to be witty rather than to be truthful. The truthful answer, which he had known for at least 4 months, and had not said aloud to a living soul, including his wife, was longer and much more difficult. And it began with the fact that she had spent her first week at Trewithen going through the estate accounts with her father's chief clerk, and her second week riding out to the flooded cottages at Nancarrow with a list, and her third week refusing to be frightened of him. He had married her for £70,000. That part was perfectly true. He had gone to Bristol in the spring like a man going to a moneylender, and Mr. Silas Soden, who had built a fleet out of nothing and could not spell, had looked at him across a desk and said, "My girl is not a bill of exchange, and if you make her unhappy I shall not sue you, I shall simply outlive you and tell everyone." The papers came at noon, by the hand of an attorney in a black coat, and Talbot was made to sign for them. There were 3 documents. He read the first standing up, and the second sitting down, and the third twice. It was a petition to the consistory court for a sentence of nullity, and it did not concern his temper, his manners, or his conduct at Lady Marchot's ball. It concerned the license. They had been married in haste, in June, in the parish of St. Andrew-under-Shaft, where neither of them had ever resided for a day. His own secretary had procured the license, and in his hurry, or in his ignorance, for she had been christened at a Bristol meeting-house, and the entry was in an old-fashioned hand, the secretary had written the bride's name as Honoria Soden. She had signed the register that way, at the altar, because a clergyman had put his finger on the line, and she was 22, and it had not occurred to her that a duke's establishment could be wrong about anything. A marriage by license in a parish where neither party resides, celebrated under a false name, was void. Not voidable. Void from the beginning as though it had never been, and the council's opinion attached to the petition, from a man whose name Talbot knew and feared, said so in 4 devastating paragraphs. And the third document was a letter in her own hand. Your Grace, my father's people found this in September. I have had it in my dressing case for 11 weeks. I did not use it, because I had begun to hope, and because on the day we rode to Nankoro together you gave your coat to Mrs. Trewithen and did not mention it afterwards, and I thought, he does not know yet what he is. I have been told what I am. I am a counting house, and you were witty about me to 400 people, and I find I cannot be witty back for the next 40 years. The settlement fails with the marriage. My father's money returns to my father, including the 11,000 already applied to your mortgages, which he will not ask for, and which I shall. I am sorry about the mortgages. I am not sorry about the rest. H. Soden. Talbot sat in his study, with the council's opinion on his knee, and discovered that of the two catastrophes in front of him. The loss of £72,000, and the certainty that a young woman in white satin had spent 11 weeks hoping he would turn out to be worth it. Only one of them had made it difficult to breathe. His attorney arrived at 3 and was full of comfort. The matter could be contested for 2 years. There were arguments on residence. The false name was his secretary's doing, and her signature was innocent. A consistory court might be persuaded that no fraud had been intended, and delay alone would bring her family to terms. Above all, said the attorney, nothing whatever should be admitted in writing. How long can you hold it up? 2 years, Your Grace, perhaps 3. And at the end of 3 years. The attorney coughed. At the end of 3 years, the lady would be 29, Your Grace, and her name would have been in the ecclesiastical reports, and no honest man would have been able to court her while the matter was in doubt. Talbot got up and walked to the window, and looked out at his own square for some minutes. Draw an acknowledgment, he said, full, unqualified, that the license was defective, that the parish was wrong, that the name was wrong, that the fault was in my household and mine alone, and that I do not contest the nullity in any particular. He turned round. And then be so good as to write to Soden's people and ask what interest they require upon £11,000. Your Grace, that is Trewithen. Yes, said the Duke of Trewithen, it is. The sentence was pronounced in the last week of February. It took 9 minutes, in a cold court, and Talbot attended in person, which nobody expected, and stood up when his name was read. The town could not decide which item to enjoy more, that the Duke of Trewithen had never been married at all, or that he had sold his London house, his hunters, his mother's diamonds, and 4 pictures out of the Long Gallery to repay £11,000 that no living person had demanded of him. Rosalind Crane called it a magnificent gesture, which in her mouth meant a stupid one, and told 3 drawing-rooms that of course it was the money he minded, since he had never pretended otherwise. He wrote to Honorine twice in March. He asked for nothing in either letter. The first said what he had done, the second said what he had failed to do at Lady Marchet's ball, in plain terms, with no wit in it anywhere. She did not answer either, and he had not the smallest right to expect it. In April he went to Bristol. Mr. Silas Soden received him in his counting-house, standing in the middle of a room full of clerks who had all suddenly discovered a passionate interest in their ledgers. "You have brass," said the merchant. "I have very little else, sir, since February." Soden looked at him for a while. "Mr. Josiah Wren has been calling on my daughter since Christmas. 4 ships, 3 of them paid for, and a mother in Clifton who thinks the sun rises out of his hat. He is a good man. I like him." "So do I," said Talbot, who had made inquiries and had been unable to find one thing wrong with the man, and had been obliged to sit with that for a fortnight. "Sir, I have not come to ask her father. I have come to ask whether her father will tell me on which day she is at home. Thursdays, said Soden. She will not see you. She did not see him on the first Thursday or the second. On the third she came down. They sat in a Bristol drawing-room with a housemaid pointedly polishing the same brass fender for half an hour, and Talbot, who had spoken in the Lords without a note, found that he could not begin. "You gave back £11,000, Honorine said at last. "Yes." "Why, my father would never have asked for it, and you knew that." "Because it was the only sentence in your letter that I could answer," said Talbot. "You wrote that you were a counting-house. I could not say anything to that. I had already said the worst thing, in the loudest room in England, to a woman I had been trying for 4 months to work out how to talk to. So I gave back the money instead, all of it, and now there is no counting-house, and I have nothing whatever to be witty about." "You have Trewithen." "I have Trewithen unmortgaged and empty, and the pictures are gone, and it turns out that I do not miss the pictures." He turned his hat over in his hands, which he had lately caught himself doing a great deal. "I have come to ask if I may call on you, not to be married, to be refused, if you like, in the ordinary way at the door, on Thursdays, as often as you wish. Mr. Wren has been calling since Christmas, and I have no standing to object to him, and I do not object to him. I only want the same door he has." Honorine Soden sat very straight with her hands in her lap. "You humiliated me," she said, "in front of 400 people, and I danced 2 dances and ate a supper and talked to a bishop about charity schools, and then I went home and was sick, and then I sat up all night in my dressing gown and drafted a petition to a church court. Do you know what the worst of it was? Not the laughing. It was that I had begun to be proud of you. I had written to my father that you were better than they said." "I know it." "Say the true answer," she said, "the one you did not give her." Talbot put down his hat. "You went into the accounts in your first week, and found the arrears at Nancarrow that my agent had been hiding for 4 years. You rode out in the rain in your second, and came back with a list of 11 roofs, and you had begun the first of them before you told me. You are not afraid of me, and you have never once flattered me, and you laugh at things nobody in my family has ever thought funny. I married you for £70,000 in June, and by October I would have married you for nothing. And I did not tell you, because a man who has been bought does not like to admit that he has also been won, and because I am a coward with a good coat and 11 generations of pride. That is the answer. Lady Rosalind Crane asked it in a room where I could be laughed at, and I chose the laugh." The maid had stopped polishing the fender entirely. "You will have to say it where she can hear it," said Honorine. "Name the room." The room, as it turned out, was the Assembly at Clifton in the second week of May, and it was Honorine's own choosing, and it was crowded, because half of London went down to Bristol that spring on business it could not afterwards explain. Lady Rosalind Crane was there. So was Mr. Josiah Wren, who bore it all extremely well, and afterwards married a woman far more suitable to him, and remained on excellent terms with both of them for 30 years. Talbot did not make a speech. He waited until the room was at its fullest, and then he walked the length of it to where Miss Soden of Bristol stood in blue silk, with a merchant's daughter's plain gold chain about her neck, and he bowed to her, and he said, in a voice pitched exactly as loudly as the one he had used at Lady Marchet's ball, "Madam, I am asked constantly why I married you. The answer is that I did it for your father's money, and that I was in love with you within 4 months, and that I said the first in public and the second to nobody, and that a court has since obliged me to begin the whole business again from the beginning. I have come to ask you to marry me. I have no fortune, no diamonds, no pictures, and no wit left of any kind. I have a house with good roofs on 11 cottages, and a great deal to apologize for. There was not one sound in that assembly room. "You will have to be married in a Bristol parish," said Honorine, "with my proper name by bands, 3 Sundays running in front of everybody." "I shall hear them all 3, said Talbot. They were married in June, 1 year and 8 days after the wedding that had never happened, in the parish where the bride resided by bands, and the register was signed Honorine Soden in a firm round merchant's hand. And the Duke of Trewithen checked the spelling himself, twice, aloud, to the amusement of the entire congregation. Her fortune was settled that time in a trust of which she was the sole and absolute mistress, drawn by her father's people with a savagery that Talbot's attorney called unnecessary and Talbot called the best day's work he had ever paid for. She kept the Trewithen books for the rest of her life. She bought back 2 of the 4 pictures in her own name and left the other 2 sold, and hung the empty frames in the long gallery, and would not have them filled. "Why the frames?" a guest asked her once at dinner. "That is my husband's doing," said the Duchess of Trewithen. "You must ask him." And Talbot, at the other end of his own table, in a house with 2 bare frames on the wall and no diamonds in it, looked down the candles at his wife and said, "They are there so that I shall never again be witty at her expense in a crowded room. It is a considerable saving in glass and gilt, and I recommend it to every man here."